Good morning, everyone.
大家早安。
We continue our study in the book of Deuteronomy.
我们在我们生命记这边来继续我们的研究圣经这一方面。
And we are looking at Deuteronomy chapter 8.
那我们在看生命记第8章。
One of the things that I have tried to encourage all of us is that whenever we study the Bible, it is very much to look at knowing God.
我已经强调很多次了，当我们在研究圣经或者经文，我们需要去知道、去认识神，而不是去读而已。
It is not just to amass knowledge of the Bible, and it is very much to know God.
我们不只是要去从圣经里面得到知识，而也是需要去认识神。
If our objective of studying the Bible is not to know God, then we would have missed the entire purpose of God's revelation to us.
如果呢，我们研究圣经不是为了去认识神，那么我们在神要给我们的启示这边，我们可能会有一些误解之类的。
We had covered chapter 8 verses 1, 2, and 3.
我们在生命记第8章呢，我们已经带过了第1节、第2还有第3节。
And we are covering chapter 8 verses 4 and 5 this morning.
那今天早上呢，我想要带到第4节和第5节。
And just to help us recall, this is a time where Moses is talking to the children of Israel on the eastern shore of the Jordan River.
那么如果你忘记的话呢，上次我们说到摩西跟第2代的以色列人在约旦河的东边那边跟他们谈话。
And these are all young people.
而且都是比较年轻的。
They are the second and third generation of the Israelites.
好，在以色列人当中的第2代和第3代。
They are the ones that have never gone to school.
他们从来没有去过学校。
They do not have a master's.
他们没有任何的学位。
They don't have a PhD.
他们没有任何博士学位。
And so they are like us.
他就像我们普通人一样。
And as they sat down and listened to Moses, they should understand what is being said.
然后当他们坐在一起呢，去研究摩西要说的东西呢，他们应该明白。
Now, unfortunately, many a times we find that when we read the Bible, we struggle to understand it.
所以很不幸的，当我们每次在读圣经的时候，我们都发现自己不是那么的明白。
You will find that you can understand the word,
你会发现你可以明白那个字眼，
but you don't understand the picture and the lesson.
但是你不完全明白整个的教会。
And the reason is because what we are reading is a translation.
因为我们所读的只是一个翻译。
Those of you who know Chinese, for example,
然后我们当中一些人会华语了，
and you also know English.
而你们也会英文。
You will notice that when I speak in English and it's translated into Chinese, it's really not as accurate, as complete as you want it to be.
那么你会发现，当他说英文还有我说中文翻译成的时候，不是那么的准确。
And that's because there are two different languages.
因为这是2个不同的语言。
It is not easy to just translate from one language to another.
而如果你要把一个语言从一种翻译成另外一种的话呢，是比较困难些。
And English and Chinese is completely different.
那么英文和中文是完全很不一样。
When we are reading Deuteronomy chapter 8, it is in Hebrew.
那我们在读生命记第8章，它是在希伯来文。
And Hebrew to English or Hebrew to Chinese is equally difficult.
那你把希伯来文翻译成英文或者中文的话，都会比较困难。
Now the translations that we have in hand is designed for us to casually read the Bible.
那么呢，我们得到的翻译只是让我们比较容易带过或者去阅读这圣经。
It is to help us who do not know Hebrew to at least glean and understand somewhat of what was said by Moses.
那么如果还是给我们让我们知道呢，在希伯来文的时候，那个摩西他真正在说什么。
If we are reading a Chinese ancient book,
如果我们在读回以前这种中文或者中国的古卷的时候，
and if I don't know Chinese
如果我不会中文，
and I read an English translation,
那么如果我阅读这个英文所翻译出
it
来的
will
话，
just be an idea of what the book
我
says.
们只会知道大概的概念是怎么样的。
And if you know ancient Chinese
如果你知道在古卷的时候呢，
and you appreciate the text,
然后而且你也是很珍惜他们当中所
you
说的
would
东
know
西，
exactly what the author is saying.
你会知道那个作者他想要表达的东西
And
是
you'll
什么。
find that if I read it in the English, I will not be able to fully comprehend what the Chinese is saying.
但是如果我用英文来阅读的话，或者读翻译的话，我不会完全的明白在说什么。
This is our problem today when we read the Bible.
但是我们今天阅读圣经的时候面对的问题，
So that when we read, we find that oftentimes we don't understand why certain things are said in a particular way.
所以呢，当我们在阅读圣经的时候，我们有时候无法去理解为什么他以说法。
It is not because God do not know how to communicate.
这不是因为神不会跟人类沟通，
It is because we do not know how to completely translate what God said.
就是因为我们自己本身不会完全的正确180%的翻译他所说的东西。
And so if I were to fully understand the ancient Chinese document, I need to learn
所以
Chinese.
如果我们要明白那种古代的古卷的时候，我们一定要去学会中文。
So if we want to know exactly what God said in the Hebrew, we need to learn Hebrew.
如果我们想要知道神在希伯来文的那个语言当中在所表达什么，我们必须去学希伯来文。
But unfortunately, we all don't go to school to learn Hebrew.
但是很不幸的，我们没有去到学校学希伯来文。
But being Chinese, we are already there half the journey.
但是身为华人的话，我们在这个路程当中，我们已经到了一半。
Because the Bible in the Hebrew is very Eastern and Oriental in the thinking.
因为呢，希伯来文在圣经当中会比较东方的思想，
We are better off than the Western people
而我们呢会比西方人的话更有一些优势，
because we have our culture that we understand.
因为我们的文化我们明
And
白，
it is a biblical culture.
而这是一个在圣经里面我们需要的那个文化。
So that when you read the Bible, it is not going to be strange as opposed to a Westerner.
所以当我们阅读圣经的时候，我们不会感到那么的诧异，如果跟那个西方人来比较的话。
And so when we begin reading, we need to then look at the text very much from a Chinese background.
所以当我们在阅读这个经节的时候，我们必须要以一个华人的这个思想去阅
Not
读，
a Westerner
而
background.
不是好像西方人的思想这样去阅读。
And so let us read Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 4.
所以我们在申命记第8章第4节，
It says here, Your garment did not wear out from upon you, and your foot did not swell up this 40 years.
所以呢这边说这40年你的衣服没有穿破，你的脚也没有肿。
It is a very simple statement.
这个是一个很简单的一个句子。
And usually when we read this verse, it will just finish and then we'll move on.
那么当我们读这个经节的句子，我们只会粗略的带过，然后我们去下一个。
But if this is what God has left for us to understand to the Israelites, perhaps there may be more.
如果呢这是神要表达的东西呢，可能它当中有更多的一些意思。
First, it describes a period of time.
首先呢，他去说了这个时间的观念，这个
It says 40 years.
他说40年，
Now, to you and I, 40 years may mean nothing.
对我们来说40年可能没有什么分别。
In the Hebrew context, 40 years is a long time.
但是在希伯来人的想法当中呢，40年是非常的久，
It is more than a generation.
它是超越了一个世代。
And you find that in that period of time, the first generation of Israelites had died.
那么呢在这40年里面，第一代的以色列人已经去世了，
The second generation has grown up.
而第二代呢已经慢慢成长了。
And the third generation are little kids.
那么第三代只是小孩子。
And so 40 years means something to the Israelites, but it doesn't mean anything to us.
所以呢，40年对我们来说是比较重要的，对我们来说没有什么太大的差别。
These 40 years that God is speaking has important lessons.
那么神所表达这40年呢，它有当了很多的重要的教诲。
Where do we find this 40
那么
years?
这40年可以在哪里找到呢？
In Numbers chapter 13, we begin to understand why.
在民数记第13章，我们开始明白为什么。
See, the Israelites left Egypt in Exodus chapter 12, 13, and 14.
那么呢，以色列人呢，在出埃及记第12还有13章开始呢，他们离开了埃及。
And they had 2 generations of Israelites.
他们有2代的这个以色列人，
The first generation, 20 years and above.
第一代就是20岁或以
And the
上，
second generation, below 20.
那么第二代就是小过20岁。
And then they left Egypt, crossed the Red Sea, and they came to Mount Sinai.
那么呢，他们离开了这个埃及，过了红海呢，来到西乃山。
And that period probably took them about 3 months.
而这个过程呢，可能花了他们3个月。
And in that 3 months, they heard God.
这3个月里面，他们听见了神。
Moses went up to Mount Sinai.
那个摩西呢，他就上了这个西乃
Now,
山。
if you had a chance to read the book of Exodus, you'd find that Moses went up and down, up and down, up and down
所
many
以，
times.
所以如果当你呢读出埃及记的时候，你可以看见了摩西，他又上又下这西乃山了很多次。
He was already 80 years old,
他已经80岁了，
but he is very fit.
但是他非常的健壮。
Now, in the entire rest of the book of Exodus, they were given the instructions of how to build the tabernacle and whatever needed to serve God.
那么呢，我们在出埃及记的时候，我们可以看到神要他们如何去建造他们祭拜的地方之类的。
And after the end of the first year, they put up the tabernacle.
那么呢，在第1年过的时候，他们去把他们所建造的东西给放出来。
Shortly thereafter, God says, "Let us move."
过后呢，神就说让我们继续的前行。
And they came to the southern part of the Dead Sea.
那么到死海的南边，
And they were about to go into the promised land.
然后他们差不多要进去这个应许之地了，
And they decided to send 12 spies.
所以他们打算送了12个间谍。
You remember that story.
你还记得那故事？
10 came back with bad news.
有10个回来带了坏消息回来，
Says, "Don't go in.
他说别进去，
They are big people and we will die with them.
他们都是很大只的人，而且我们今
Let
天
us
去
go back."
那我们回去。
But 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, decided to tell the people, "Go in because God has given us this land."
那么约书亚跟迦勒呢，他就说让我们进去，这是神应许我们
And
的地
these
方。
2 young men says that this is a land that God said that is flowing with milk and honey.
那么神说这地方呢是有流奶之蜜的地方，
But they were overruled.
但是呢他们就不听。
The first generation of Israelites decided not to go in.
那么第1代的以色列人就说他们不要进去。
Can you imagine this?
你可以想象吗？
You see, God already showed them 10 miracles in Egypt
神让他们见到了10大奇迹，
and caused Pharaoh to let them go.
然后导致呢法老王让他们走。
They also saw the miracle of the crossing of the Red
他
Sea.
们也看到了这个过红海的这个奇
They
迹，
crossed the Red Sea and they also saw the miracle of the water.
他们过了红海又看到这个石头注水的这个奇迹，
And then you see that bitter water became sweet water.
你也可以看到苦水变成甜的。
They had nothing to eat and God gave them manna.
他们没有食物处，神就给他们的玛纳。
And now they said, "No, we shouldn't go in."
那么现在他们又说哦，不可以了，不可以进去。
And here we see a principle of God.
所以这边我们看到神的这个应许
A principle of God.
他的守则，
The principle of God is very just.
他的守则就是说他非常的正直。
These generation of people saw what God did.
这一代的以色列人呢，他看见神可以做的事情，
They saw God at Mount Sinai.
他们在西乃山呢见到
You
神。
can go back and read in Exodus chapter
如
19.
果你想要的话，可以回去读出埃及记第19章。
And now they refuse to go into the promised land.
而现在他们不想要进去这应许之
The
地。
justice of God says that if you have seen me, you cannot not do what I want.
如果呢，神曾经说过，如果你看见了我，你不可以不做我叫你做的东西。
And so if you don't want to go in, then you will never go in.
所以神说，如果你不要进去的话，那你永远也不能进去。
And so they are to die in the
所以
wilderness.
呢，他们在旷野之中就死亡了。
And so who did God allow to go into the promised land?
然后神又应许谁进去那个应许之地呢？
The 20-year-old below and the people, the babies who were born in the wilderness.
那么就是说，20岁或以下的，或者在那个旷野出生中的小孩子们。
And these were the ones who could not choose when they came out of Egypt.
而这一班人呢，或者这一群呢，就是说他们当初从埃及出来的时候，他们无法选择
And。the adults will die.
而这些成年人呢，他们就会死亡。
And so God treats those who have not yet seen with greater mercy than those who have seen.
然后呢，神比较怜悯那些还没有看见这应许之地的
You
人。
can also see that in the generations to come in the nation of Israel, God was not so severe with them.
那么你可以看，在接下来这一代的这些以色列人呢，神可能对他们没有那么的严厉，
Now, God still judged them.
神还会审判他
Now, don't
们。
get me wrong.
你不要误解，
It's just that God had more patience with them.
只是神对他们比较有耐心，
But with this first generation,
但是对这第一代的呢，
there is no mercy.
根本没有怜悯，
You have seen it and yet you do not follow.
因为你看过了，你看见了，但是你还是不要
And so
跟从。
God made them go through the wilderness in these 40 years.
所以神呢，让他们在这40年里面，在这个旷野流浪。
Now, in that 40 years, you will also see God's mercy to them.
在这40年呢，你会看到神对他们的怜悯之
See,
心。
God did not allow them to enter into the promised land.
神不让他们进入应许之地。
And most of the time, the things that we hear about not able to enter the promised land are bad things.
那么通常我们听到的就是说，为什么不可以进去，都是一些坏的东西。
God did not allow the first generation to go in. It is a judgment to their lack of confidence in
就
God.
是因为神对他们第一代人的这些审判，这个原因就是因为他们没有信心。
But God did not kill them.
但是神没有杀了他们，
God did not destroy them.
神没有摧毁他们，
God gave them another 40 years
神给了他们另外40年，
that they will die naturally in the wilderness.
好让他们可以在这个旷野中自然的死亡。
And God took care of them.
而神也照顾他们。
See, we never think of God that way.
那我们从来没想过神以这个方
You,
法去
you
想。
think of God being very serious and severe over this first generation
我们
of
我们
Israelites.
通常都是想神是一个非常严厉的，对这个第一代的以色列人。
If God was that severe, they would have all died.
如果神是真的那么的严厉，他们都会当场死亡。
God did not destroy them.
但是神没有当场去摧毁他
God
们，
allowed them to continue to live.
神让他们继续的存活下
And
去。
God continued to teach them.
那神也是继续的教导他们。
How did God teach them?
那么神如何去教导
God
呢？
continued to guide them and told them what to do.
神继续引导他们，而且告诉他们应该做什
God
么。
continued to provide for them.
还是继续的提供一些东西给他们，
And God continued to protect them.
也继续保护他们。
The only difference is that they do not get to enjoy the land.
只是他们无法去享受或者用这个应许之地，
Because God decided that they do not deserve to enjoy the land yet.
因为神认为他们并不配去享受这块地，
And so it is not time to give them the land.
而这个时间呢，不是这个用这时间给他们这个应许之地。
But now when Moses is telling this younger generation of Israelites, it is time.
那么现在当摩西跟这些比较 第二代和第三代以色列人说的时候，就是时间到了，
everyone has died.
每一位都死了
That。first generation has almost finished dying.
那么第一代的人呢，剩下寥寥无几了。
Aaron died.
亚伦死了，
Miriam died.
美利安也是死了，
And Moses will die.
摩西也是跟着死亡。
But the rest have died.
那么，但是其他的呢，还在已经死了。
That is why Moses had to spend time in these last few months of his life to review everything God has done for them.
这是为什么摩西呢需要去用这剩下几个时间去告诉他们神所告诉他们的东西，
Because they have to remember what God has done.
因为他们必须去记得神做了什么。
The first generation already died.
那么第一代已经不在了，
Is to remind the second and third generation.
是为了提醒第二个、第三代的以色列人。
Look at what God says. Your garment did not wear out from upon you.
他这里说呢，你的衣服没有穿破。
It told them that whatever they need in their daily lives has been taken care of by God.
就是说他们平时所需要的东西呢，神已经有了。
You
照顾
did not see the 10 miracles in Egypt.
你没有在那个埃及那边看到这10大奇
You
迹，
did not see the crossing of the Red Sea.
你没有看到过红海，
But you have eaten manna.
但是你吃了玛纳，
And you will continue to eat manna until they cross the Jordan River.
那么你会继续的吃这个玛纳，直到他们过了这个约旦河。
And you don't have to worry about your clothes wearing out.
那你也是不用怕你衣服穿破，
Now, because of this, you would not find department stores, right?
所以因为这个你不用去买衣服，
They don't have to make clothes.
他们不需要自己做衣服，
Whatever they have been wearing continue to be new.
他们所穿的还是继续保持那么的
Isn't
新，
that a miracle?
这不是奇迹
They don't
吗？
have to worry about all these basic things.
他们不需要去担心这些东西。
Then it says, your foot did not swell up these 40
这也
years.
是说，这40年你的脚也没有肿，
It means that if you have been walking that much, your feet will swell up.
就是说，如果你真的走了那么的多，你的脚一定会肿。
God took care of their health.
神照顾了他们的健康，
These are basic things that people in those days and in our time will need.
这些都是我们以前的人或者现在的人所需要的基本的东西。
And you notice this is the mercy of God.
你可以看到，这是神在怜悯他们，
Because they don't have a chance to have new clothes, their clothes will not wear out.
因为他们没有这个机会去买新的衣服，所以他们的衣服根本没有穿破。
Last week we see that they were having manna.
上个礼拜呢，我们说了，他们在吃这个玛纳，
Their feet will not swell.
他们的脚也不会肿。
Basically, what we are seeing is that this is the God of Israel who took care of his people.
所以这很明显看得到，神在照顾他的子民。
Why do you think God took them out of Egypt and then to kill them?
那么你为什么会觉得神从埃及救了他们出来过后呢，又去杀了他们？
If God wants to destroy his people who have left them in Egypt,
如果神真的要杀了他们，神根本不会把他们从埃及救出来。
because they refused to enter into the promised land, that's all they never got to do. They never got to enjoy the promised land.
因为他们不想要进去这应许之地呢，所以神说算了，你就不用进去。
But they still enjoy the protection and provision of God.
但是呢，他们还是得到神的保护。
Now we look at verse 5.
我们看第5节
It，says, and you will learn to know with your heart as though like when a man corrects his son, Jehovah your Elohim is correcting you.
所以呢，这边说你当心里思想耶和华，你神管教你，好像人管教儿子一样。
This is a conclusion of the first 4 verses.
所以呢，这个是可以说我们第1节到第4节当中做了一个结论。
Now that you look back in those verses, you will see how God is teaching them.
所以呢，如果你真的去看第1节、第4节，你可以看到神就好像如何的管教他们。
God is showing them that God is correcting them when they do wrong, like a father to a son.
那么神呢，就好像一个父亲管教儿子一样，去教导他们对的方式。
You see, a father doesn't kill their
你
sons.
可以看得到，一个父亲不会杀了儿子，
A father loves a son.
因为一个父亲爱他的儿子。
God saved Israel from Egypt not to kill them,
神呢把以色列人从埃及救出来，不是为了杀他们，
but to correct them.
但是去管教他们。
So when they decided not to obey God to enter into the promised land, God had to discipline them.
所以当他们去告诉神，他们不想要进去应许之地呢，神必须去管教他
See,
们。
we all parents here.
所以我们当中有很多的父母亲。
So when our children do not listen to us, we don't kill them.
当我们的孩子呢不听我们的话，我们没有可能去杀了他们。
We will teach them.
我们会管教，
We will discipline
我
them.
们会惩罚。
We are not going to reward them for doing wrong.
我们不会因为他做错事而奖赏他。
How many of you would say that if your children came back and says, I have failed all my exams, can I have ice cream?
你没有听过有一个孩子说哦，我全部科目不及格，你会给他一个冰淇淋吗？
Of course not.
当然不会，
You will have different things to give.
你会有不同的东西给他。
You may take out the cane and give that child a lesson,
可能你用藤鞭给他一个教诲，
but you do not kill your child.
但是你不会把他给
And so
杀了。
God is saying, I've done all of these things is to teach you like a father to a son.
那么神说，我做了那么多的事情，就是想要管教你，像一个父亲管教儿子一样。
But the key here is this, that you will learn to know with your heart.
那么这里重要就是说，当心理思想。
First of all, they are to learn.
首先呢，他们需要去学。
Correction has to be learned.
那么这些做对的东西或者改正的话，需要去
See,
学。
as a parent, when you discipline your child, you hope that your child will learn from it.
所以当你惩罚你孩子的时候，你会希望你的孩子从当中学习到。
And so your actions are designed to help the child realize that they have done wrong, and so they do not do it again.
所以你的行为呢，是要让你的孩子知道他们做错了，而且不会再重犯。
But why does it say in your heart?
但是为什么这里说在你心里？
Now, I have often reminded us that when the Bible talks about heart, it doesn't really mean our modern day heart.
当然，我其实说过多次，当圣经说心里的时候，不是说现在我们所看到的心，
It does mean the heart that beats inside of us,
它也是说我们在心脏，
but it means also the mind.
但是也是说我们的思想，
This is our mind that leads us to make decisions,
因为我们头脑、我们的思想是让我们去做决定，
so that the Israelites would learn to make the right decisions.
好让以色列人会做对的选择。
So just like when you teach your children, after the discipline, you want your children to do the right things and to choose rightly.
就是说，这个跟我们一样，如果当你惩罚了你孩子，你让你孩子会去想去做对的东西。
And so the idea of heart as in the mind, as in the thought, is not inside but can be seen through the choices and actions.
而这里的心，也就是不是说我们看不到的里面就是心或头脑，而是你所做出来的选择。
And you notice this is very Chinese.
所以呢，你会发现这是跟我们东方人很相似。
Because when you tell your children to learn, it is not to learn quietly.
因为呢，当你叫你孩子去学，不是静静的去学，
It's so that they will not do it again.
是让他们不会再继续的重
And you
犯。
can see that they have learned.
那么你也是可以看得见他们是否
And that
有
is
学
what
到。
God wants the Israelites to do.
所以呢，这是神要以色列人做的东西。
And it's always Jehovah your Elohim.
就是说，耶和华你神，
Remember what is Elohim.
记得什么是你神？
I have repeated this many times.
我已经重复了很多次。
The word that the English translate or the Chinese translate as God is this Hebrew word Elohim.
那么呢，当我们把这个神或者在英文的 God 的话，都是从 Elohim 这一个字翻译出来。
But what it really means is this is God the mighty, powerful one.
但是呢，这边说 Elohim 也就是说神全能伟大的神，
He is the God that can save them out of Egypt.
他是那一位可以把我们从埃及拯救出来的
He
那位
is the
神。
God that can turn bitter water into sweet water.
他是那位可以把苦水变甜的那位神，
He is the God that can give food from heaven.
他是那一位可以把食物从天上
He
放
is the
下来。
God that can protect them from their clothes wearing out.
好，也是那位神，好让他们的衣服不穿破。
He's a God that can make sure that their feet will not swell.
他是那一位神，确保你的脚不会肿。
That is the Elohim.
那就是我们说的 Elohim 全能伟大的
And
神。
so we call him God.
这是为什么我叫他神。
And he has a name.
那么还有一个名字，
What is God's name?
那么神的名字叫什么呢？
Yehovah.
就耶和华。
And so the Hebrew word Yehovah is very close to the Chinese
那
pronunciation.
么呢，在希伯来文的话呢，它的耶和华的这个翻译呢，或者读音呢，就和华文的很相似。
And so this is the God that has protected them all these 40
所
years.
以这就是那一位神保护了他们，在这40年里面
And
保护
God
了他们。
has been teaching them and correcting them.
那么神呢，也是在教导，也在管教他们。
Can you see what kind of God is this?
你可以看的是，这是什么样的一位神吗？
He is a just God.
他是一个正直公正的神。
When you've done wrong, he will judge.
当你做错的东西呢，他就会审判。
To the first generation, very severely.
对第一代的以色列人呢，他审判的非常的严重。
But to the second generation and the third generation, less severe.
但是呢，在第二代或第三代就没有的那么严
And in
重。
the following generations, more patience.
那么，但是在接下来的那几代呢，会更加有耐心。
This is justice
这是就是我们所说的这个公正。
because they have not heard God or saw God at Mount Sinai. These later generations are treated with more mercy.
为什么呢？因为接下来这几代的以色列人呢，他们没有看过神在西乃山那边。
And so, more mercy doesn't mean no judgment.
但是呢，更多怜悯之心呢，不代表没有审判，
It's just that the judgment will come a little
只
later.
是说审判可能会比较迟来的。
God still judges.
但是神还是会去审判。
So we see this aspect of God.
所以我们从这一方面可以看到神的性格。
The first generation cannot go into the promised land to enjoy it.
那么第一代呢，无法进去应许之地去享受、去享用，
But God still gave it to the second and third generations.
但是神还是给了第二还有第三代。
So God is faithful.
所以神呢是信实的，
God is fair.
神是公平。
God didn't say all Israelites cannot go in.
神并没有说全部的以色列人无法进去。
God says the ones that have seen me and made that decision, they cannot go in.
只是神说那一些已经看过我，还有做这个决定的话是不可以进去。
And so 40 years, they all died.
所以在40年里面，他们就全部灭亡了。
Moses.
摩西呢？
We will talk about Moses and then we will close.
那我们现在谈了摩西，我们就会做一个结束。
Moses is God's chosen leader.
那么摩西是神所选的这个领袖，
And Moses can't go in.
然后摩西无法进去，
Why can't Moses go in?
为什么呢？
Well, we have read
No.
Moses disobeyed God.
因为我们曾经读过摩西呢，他没有顺从神，
We would think that it's a small matter.
我们以为是一个很小的事情。
God says, speak to the rock and water will come out.
那么神去告诉他，跟那石头说一下东西，让水就会出来。
But Moses became very angry with the Israelites and struck the rock twice.
但是摩西就非常生气以色列人，而用那个拐杖呢去打了这石头2次。
The picture that we don't see is this.
我们所看不见的这个景象是这样子。
Moses is a servant of God.
摩西呢是神的仆人，
Moses reflects the decisions of God.
摩西呢他反映出了神的决定。
Because God speaks to Moses, Moses will speak to the people.
因为呢，神跟摩西说话，而摩西就把这些话传给这个以色列人。
Moses reflects God.
那么，所以摩西就反映了这个神。
Moses will demonstrate God's character.
那么摩西他所做的东西都是就好像代表着神的这个角色。
Striking the rock twice in anger is not God's character.
很生气的用这个拐杖去打了这石头2次，根本不是神的这个性格。
That one single event, God judged very severely.
就因为这一次一个事情的发生呢，神就审判了他，
Because he saw God.
因为他看见了神，
He constantly had conversations with God
他时常和神聊天，
that he misrepresented God.
但是呢，他没有把神的这个形象给带了出来，
So he never got to go in.
所以他从来没有得到这机会
He
进
was the
去。
last of the first generation.
他是在第一代最后一位，
But God allowed him to see.
但是神让他看见，
So you can see that God is just.
所以你可以看得见神是很公正的。
Moses cannot say, "Oh God, I have been your closest servant. Why don't you let me go in?"
摩西没有跟神说：“我是你最亲爱的仆人，为什么不给我进去？”
If God did not allow the first generation to go in, God cannot allow Moses to go in.
因为如果神没有让第一代的以色列人进去，为什么可以让摩西进去呢？
More so, Moses should know better
而且呢，摩西应该更加的明白，
because he has seen God.
因为他曾经看见神，
And he is the one who is instructing the children of Israel.
而他也是给这些以色列人指示的那一位。
So you can see God is fair.
所以你可以看得见神是很公平的。
Moses cannot say, "Oh, I am your closest servant."
摩西呢不可以说神啊，我是你最亲爱的仆人。
God doesn't care about closeness in relationship.
那么呢，神根本没有去理这个关系。
Being a fair and just God means that whatever went wrong must be judged fairly.
所以呢，对神来说，公平和公正呢，就是说，当你做错事情，必须要公正的审判。
And these words are written for us to know that God will teach and discipline his people.
所以呢，这些让我们知道，神是会管教，而且是会惩罚他的子民。
And God is just and fair.
所以神也是一个公平公正的神。
God is love, obviously.
所以我们大家都说神是爱，
God took care of them.
神也是有照顾他们。
Love has nothing to do with judgment.
但是呢，爱和审判是两回
You
事。
cannot say, "I love you," and then I will not judge you.
你不会说哦，我爱你，但是我不会审判
That
你，
is not a fair God.
因为那不是一个公平的神。
Because the Hebrew concept of love is not our concept of love.
因为希伯来人对爱的观念呢，跟我们的是不一样。
And we will leave this for another day.
那我们会把这个东西也带到下一个来
May
说。
God bless the reading of His word.
愿神保佑我们。